Hi, I'm Flora Jane D'Arienzo with the Biennial of the Americas. Thank you for joining us virtually for our 2021 Americas Leadership Forum. We are delighted to be convening leaders from across the Americas to speak on timely and relevant topics, such as global leadership, arts, and environmental and social corporate governance. We are also grateful to the Cuba Study Group, who are joining us here in Denver, Colorado. Their partnership on the U.S.-Cuba Re-Engagement Panel has been invaluable. Our mission is to create connections, build community, and inspire change across the Americas, and we are grateful to those of you who are tuning in throughout the program. We hope today's conversations will inspire curiosity and appreciation for the diverse perspectives and will advance global understanding and inclusivity throughout the cross-cultural exchange of ideas. The Biennial of the Americas acknowledges the Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne tribes. These indigenous people are the original inhabitants of the land we are broadcasting from today. And now a word from our presenting sponsor, EY.
Good morning, and thank you for joining the 2021 Americas Leadership Forum. I'm Scott Hefner. I'm a senior partner with Ernst & Young, and I also serve on the executive board of the Biennial. I've been engaged with the Biennial for a number of years, probably up to 10 years at this point, across much of their programming activity, some of which is right here in Denver, Colorado, and some of which is throughout the Americas through summits to places like Canada, Colombia, Cuba, Mexico, and many other destinations where we engage local business, civic, cultural, artists, a whole array of individuals to further relationships and draw connections even tighter throughout the Western Hemisphere. Why is this important? And why is global leadership important in this particular topic we're covering here today? Well, at EY, we know that building a globally inclusive and diverse and collaborative workforce that is tremendously internationally savvy is going to be important to all of us. We're on a journey to continue to develop that workforce and transform the impact we're having and to build a better working world. We believe Biennial is much the same. A lot of the initiatives the Biennial has in place is to support that inclusiveness and that collaboration across borders, across the entire Americas. And that's multiple constituencies, the cultural community, the business community, the civic community, all with the goal of improving people's lives. We like that as an ideal. We're proud at Ernst & Young to support the Biennial, and we think today's program, today's leadership forum, is going to be a great opportunity for you to hear more. We've got an incredible lineup of guest speakers set up for you here, and again, I want to thank you for your participation and welcome you to the forum, and hope you all enjoy it.
We have great panelists here. We have Mabel Miguel, Nikki, and Ken Boyer as well. And we will be getting started now. So thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, everyone, wherever you are in the world. I'm Mabel Miguel. If you have memorized my bio, which I'm sure all of you have done, you know I'm originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I grew up in Caracas, Venezuela. I lived in Barbados, in Turkey, in France. I've been all over the place. I have been on the faculty of the Keenan Flagler Business School for more decades, that I'm willing to acknowledge almost, but over 30 years, I have been at Keenan Flagler Business School. I have worn many hats over the years. I'm a professor of core leadership and management for our working professional programs. So those are the evening MBA students, the weekend, the ones who come fully online, folks who have in common that they have a job and they're getting an MBA. And in addition, my specialty and interest is global leadership. So I have worn, again, several hats in that area. I've been director of international programs, director of the Business School Global Education Initiative. I will tell you more about that in a few minutes. And director of the Global Business Center. So I really look forward to talking about the topic that I'm truly passionate about. And I would like to ask Nikki Lewis-Simon to introduce herself now.
Thank you so much, Mabel, and thank you for this opportunity to join everyone today. As Mabel shared, my name is Nikki Lewis-Simon. I'm a commercial litigator at Greenberg Traurig Law Firm based in our Miami office. I also have the privilege of serving as the firm's Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. I've been practicing law for about 22 years, the last 19 of which have been at Greenberg Traurig, and I'm very excited to be a part of this conversation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Let me follow that. Thank you, Nikki Mabel. Great to be with you and great to be with all of you today. So looking forward to the conversation. My name is Ken Boyer. I am with EY. So we are a global professional services firm of about 300,000 people, and I am part of our New York office. A little bit about my bio. I've been with the firm 30 years. So 30 seems to be a big number, but 30 years with the firm. Actually started with the firm in our audit practice. So I'm a recovering auditor, I always say. So I've done audit for the firm for a number of years, consulting with the firm, and now about 10 years in this diversity role. And I lead all of our diverse D&I recruiting for the firm, for our campus and experience recruits. You know, just to give you a sense, we'll bring in about 15,000 people annually into the firm. And so my team and I really oversee our D&I strategy. And what we think about every day is how do we make EY more diverse? And I spend a lot of time with our clients, a lot of time engaging on the D&I discussion. Inclusive leadership to me is critical to all this. And so I really look forward to having the dialogue with all of you today. So thanks and great being here.
Thank you, Ken. And I would like us to continue to give an idea of what we do or key messages we don't want people to forget. So we're going to put them up front before we open it up for questions. And with 30 years experience and really doing everything in your firm, if you were to lead people with just a handful of key messages that you want to frame from the beginning, what would that be?
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, I'll give you just a quick story because I think diversity, equity, and inclusion certainly is something that, as a firm for EY, we've been focused on for more than 25 years. You know, certainly the names have changed and evolved, and the focus. You know, in the early days, it was called like minority recruiting, if you will. But certainly, it's evolved to diversity. The definition of diversity has certainly expanded as well. And when I think about what we focus on, obviously gender, ethnicity, but our veterans, the LGBT space, people with disabilities. So there's a big focus of ours in this concept and term called diversity. So that is critically important. We also are focused on inclusion, or what we like to call belonging. And I would just say quickly, belonging, I firmly believe in that concept called belonging or inclusion. And here's why. So when I started with the firm 30 years ago in the audit practice in New York, I will just tell you, I did not feel like I belonged. I mean, I was a first generation college student. I remember starting with the class of about 130 in New York. There were not a lot of people in that start class of 130 that looked like me. And by that, I mean, good looking. No, I'm just kidding. By that, I mean, just, you know, people of color. So, you know, walking into an environment like that, I felt different. And quite honestly, my first couple of years, I wasn't so sure I belonged with the firm. But obviously 30 years later, there's a story there. But through the grace of a lot of people and a lot of great mentors, I felt a sense of belonging, inclusion. And so this role for me is really important. And I know that having inclusive leaders is critical to that, right? If I don't feel like I belong, I'll probably leave the firm. As many people in your organizations, if they don't feel like they belong or they feel like they're not included, they're going to leave. And I think this whole concept of inclusive leadership is critical to the discussion, and another element of leadership that often goes unnoticed, not focused on. That's why I think, Mabel, the discussion today is critical around what does it really mean to be an inclusive leader and why is it so important? I'm here to tell you that is critically important. It was important to me that I worked with leaders who were inclusive, who helped me feel like I belong. And 30 years later, I am still with an incredible firm. So those are a couple comments, Mabel, as I turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Nikki?
Thank you for that. And I prepared a sort of a written statement so I could remember. So I just want to say we want the best talent available for our respective companies and businesses. And that talent is going to drive creativity and innovation and client service in all of its various forms. So to attract both top talent and ultimately business, we need a culture that welcomes everyone, regardless of race, creed, religion, to all the points that Ken raised, gender identity or other differences. In fact, we want this diverse workforce. And to get the best and the brightest, we really do have to create a culture, to Ken's point, that supports everyone so that all feel welcomed, heard, and valued. So at Greenberg Traurig back in 1967, the firm was founded by 3 lawyers who couldn't otherwise find work because they were Jewish. And so our firm was founded sort of based on and embracing differences. And if you fast forward now to 2021, we're still doing that. It's really a core part of who we are as a law firm. And so we work hard every day to ensure our lawyers and amazing business staff feel valued, heard, and embraced. And as a commercial litigator, even going into court in front of certain judges, representing clients, whatever it is that we do here, whether it's in court or in the public finance space or other spaces, we need to have that diversity of perspectives. And whether we do it through our affinity groups or mobilizing diverse client teams, internally and externally collaborating with our community partners and other stakeholders, it's critically important. All of these efforts require globally inclusive leadership. It's critical, I believe, to maintaining our competitive advantage as a company and as a country. So Mabel, thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So as you have heard, let's call it corporate America, to give it a label, is very, very interested in leveraging all the people, and not just including people, not just hiring people who are different, but also including them in the conversation. And that is how they know they're going to do their best work. So you can imagine that they turn to us, to business schools. I don't know if I made that clear, but I work at the Keenan Flagler Business School. I'm a professor of organizational behavior, and that is part of the University of North Carolina. And they come to us and they say, okay, are you training people so that they are going to be ready to be globally inclusive leaders? So clearly that fell under my purview in my with my hat that had to do with global issues. So we got together a large group of faculty and staff and alumni and corporate partners like Ken and like Nikki, and said, okay, what are we looking at? What skills, what knowledge, what business practices do you want our students to learn about? And out of this came the global education model. So I want you to imagine a graphic that at its heart has skills, knowledge, and business practices that are fundamental for people to be effective as global inclusive leaders. And now I'll catch my breath here and say that the same knowledge, skills, and business practice that enable you to be a globally inclusive leader enable you to be an inclusive leader within the boundaries of your geography, wherever you are in the world. Countries are diverse. And so if you can manage diversity across geographic boundaries, you can definitely manage diversity within geographic boundaries. So what are these? Now, we're a business school, so we look at business practices. We have 7 different areas. People take core courses in all 7 areas: strategy, accounting, finance, operations, organizational behavior. All of our coursework is going to have some discussion about how things are different in different cultures, across cultures. So now instead of saying globally, I'm going to say multiculturally, across different cultures, whether they are also different geographies in terms of national boundaries or not. Then we looked at the skills that we wanted people to have. And we realized that the difference between experience, and many of our students have experience where they come in, and expertise is reflection. So a key skill that we teach in our program is reflection. We also teach collaboration. It's one of the things that our business school is known for having collaborative leaders. Adaptability, and of course, empathy. Empathy, being able to put yourself in the shoes of other people. So this is core skill set that we teach. In terms of actual knowledge, well, of course, we have to teach logistics. Supply chain is a huge conversation right now, global supply chains. That has to be part of the conversation. How is business done differently in different geographies and across different cultures? How about intercultural knowledge? What is the predominant culture in a certain part of the world versus another? Understanding that they are generalizations, but very important generalizations. Now, surrounding all of this, skills, knowledge, and business practices is the attitude of our students. We always tell students that attitude is a multiplier. If they approach our curriculum in an open-minded way, if they are flexible in how they behave, they're introspective, they think about why they do what they do, they are resilient enough to deal with stress, and maybe critically important, the most important, are respectful of people who have different views and different approaches, then you're going to make the most out of this educational experience. So I want you to be thinking right now about your attitude. Would you describe yourself as open, respectful, resilient, introspective, and flexible? If you do, you're in great shape to become an inclusive multicultural leader. And we would like, without any more ado, to open this to questions. And we have a background moderator that will be collecting your questions. So please, we want this to be a conversation. Trust me, any of the three of us have the capacity to talk for the next 20 minutes. But we do not want that to happen. We want to be responsive to you. So, Robin, will you be feeding the questions through the chat? Do I understand that correctly? And you can answer me through chat. Okay, so Robin says yes, she'll be feeding us questions through chat. And so if you could channel any of your questions, so you make this your session. And when you do pass a question, if you could tell us where you are in the world, in the country, I would really appreciate that.
And Mabel, as we wait for questions to come through, let me just make a couple other comments, because I liked your model and what you said. By the way, I think universities are key. We actually happen to hire a lot of your students, and I know they do have this inclusive mindset, which I think is important. So thank you for that, and I appreciate the focus. I think, though, from a corporate perspective, I do think a lot of organizations miss this concept of inclusive leadership. I think many are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion in some respect. But again, I think the secret sauce is once you have a diverse set of employees or personnel, the question is, how comfortable do they feel? And when you really boil it down to like an engagement or a project team, is your manager truly an inclusive leader? Right? You always hear, oh, people don't leave organizations, they leave managers. So I wonder, what are you doing to quote unquote train your managers to be inclusive leaders? Right? How are you preparing them to, once you hire a diverse workforce, to maximize that diversity? And you do that through inclusive leadership. And I just find that, and I talk to a lot of companies around diversity issues, many are not focused on that term, inclusive leader. And so again, a question I pose to the group and the audience is, how are you preparing your leaders to be inclusive as they work within your respective organizations?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question. Mm-hmm. And Nikki, I don't know if you want to address what Ken just said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll start, and then Mabel, really, I'd love to hear, your views. Again, you are a trainer of leaders as well, but I would say it's really what we've been trying to do is to move the conversation sort of from the baseline of how do we interrupt biases, which is sort of a very basic platform. And I think to Mabel's point about the matrix that they teach to, elevate the conversation more to leadership traits based on cultural competency, empathy, curiosity, humility, and start to talk about how would we lead. For example, even in our own families, our families are very diverse. We've got people from all over different cultures. So if we talk about it in terms of, if you were to travel to a different country, you would likely prepare yourself to embrace the culture, right? You would say, okay, let me read up on the country, let me read up on the primary languages and all of that, so that when you enter that country, you could be respectful of its norms and its processes. So if we take that model, and that's what something we've been trying to do, and say, look, it's the same concept. Now bring that into the workplace. You would not show up in a new country and just do whatever you would do, and not be respectful of the cultural norms and the other pieces that make that country special and unique. That's the same way we need to be showing up for our teams.
Thank you very much, Nikki. We have a question coming in from Canada. I'm curious, what do you think it will take for white male leaders to be able to make space for diverse leaders to take on larger roles? So implied in the question is that in some organizations, you look at the most senior levels, and they are predominantly male and white. And the question is, what can those people who are in these positions of power do to make space for more diverse leaders to climb the ranks? Ken, can I ask you to get started on that?
Absolutely, and it's a really, really great question, and I think I'll give you a few comments here. I think often when organizations start this diversity journey, in my opinion, in fact, they leave out white males, a lot of them, right? It's focused on a lot of groups. It could be women, it could be people of color, but they leave out the white males. I would say first, as you start your journey, you've got to truly be inclusive. Because white males are part of it. By the way, white males are diverse. I've got a lot of white male friends. None of them are the same. So they bring a lot of diversity as well. So I think recognizing that is important. But I would ask you to think about the following. When I talk to the clients, I'll ask the question as follows. And I would say in the US, and it's certainly gotten press around the world, I'll call it the post-George Floyd phenomena. Certainly after the George Floyd video, and everyone probably saw it, organizations were quick to issue statements from their respective CEO, double down on the diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, and it was great. And I've had a number of conversations to that end. But what I often ask CEOs and leadership teams and a lot of white males to the question is, why does diversity matter to you personally? I can't tell you why it should matter to you, but I do think you should reflect on why does it matter to you personally. I'd say a lot of people had their DNI aha moment when they saw the George Floyd video. They recognized that there was a lot of inequities, and they've got to do something different to change the game, if you will. So why does it matter to you personally? I think appreciating and respecting difference is important. And as a white male, to the question, if you think your organization is going to be better off because of diversity of thought, perspective, how you serve clients, how you get new business, right? I think you should create room at the table. And it's not a zero-sum game. I think a lot of people think that if a person of color, for example, wins, a white male loses. Not the case. If you do it the right way, 1 + 1 can equal 7 or 8 or 10. So those are a few thoughts.
Thank you, Ken. And it's this idea of leverage, right? And I like that you said, clearly people, white males need to be part of the conversation. It cannot be a conversation that excludes them, because it wouldn't be a meaningful conversation. And Nikki, before I ask you to think or reflect on that question, there's a question coming in from Florida that's an extension of the first question and ties in very nicely with what Ken just said. Said, I see diversity leaders hired. So I said, diverse leaders are hired, but it's like a revolving door. So the question says, those viewpoints and leadership isn't valued. So these people leave, right? Why is that? And I always say, well, it's not enough to hire the diverse people. Then you have to include them in the conversation, right? Whether they are from China or from a different Native American group in your own country, right? It doesn't matter. It's bringing them in and then including them, demonstrating value. So Nikki, how does your organization keep this revolving door from happening? So you hire people, but then you include them in the conversation. You signal their value.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of mentorship and sponsorship. And again, I don't think mentorship and sponsorship is exclusive to, those who are racially, ethnically, gender diverse. These are the same kinds of pieces to the puzzle that are critical for any leader to be successful. This is not unique to diverse leaders. So I think being focused on that for diversity and inclusion and belonging are critically important. I think also creating that environment, to the attendees' first question from Canada, in terms of understanding that to the extent we have straight white males in leadership, bringing them to the table, letting them know that the elevation of the diverse leaders on their team is not their demotion, right? That's not their their demotion. It is seen as a sign of success and strong leadership that the leaders on your team, all of them, including the diverse ones, continue to be elevated in the organization. And so I think that that's critically important. And sometimes it's very difficult. Again, if we don't have curiosity, if we don't have the humility, if we don't have the empathy and the cultural competency, it's very difficult to guide this very different team with different perspectives and background, but it can be done. And I think it's something that we're absolutely focused on. What I'll also say is, to the extent we're always talking about the business case for inclusion, we need to also be focused on trying to stem the tide of the cost of attrition. This is exactly what this question also goes to. Retention is critically important, because with that revolving door comes increased cost and expenses, because now we're going to have to go back out and rehire for that role. Very critically important as the business case is developed.
Yeah, if I could add, I love that, Nikki. And I want to underscore this environment discussion. I think a lot of times we recruit people into our organizations who are different and they leave. To that question, the question is why. I would do a deep dive into your environment, your processes. For example, your promotion processes, your performance management processes. Are there some biases that exist? My guess is probably yes. We all have that in our organizations. But I think just taking a step back and reflecting on, is our environment really welcoming? And again, just recruiting diverse talent is only the first step. It is, as Nikki mentioned, it's about your environment too. Most don't pay attention to the environment. The other thing you probably do this is, if those leaders are leaving, have a heart-to-heart and ask them why. And hopefully they're truthful in what they weren't getting. There's something they're not getting there. I don't know what it is, but try to really talk to them and understand what those things are and course correct. There's something not right. Now, by the way, at EY, we have a similar issue, right? We have turnover, and certainly our diverse individuals. Some of it's because our clients know they're talented and they recruit them away. That's just part of it. So, there could be some positive. I don't know what kind of business you're in, but again, deep dive, look at your environment, find out where the bias exists, and back to the topic, do you have inclusive leaders? So if you have project teams and these folks are working on teams, are the folks leading truly inclusive? That's questions you should be asking.
Thank you so much, Ken, for that. And I want to piggyback on something you said. And I always tell my students that you don't get the behavior you expect. You get the behavior you inspect. So when you look at performance management, how are people assessed? So if senior leaders, if the ones who, as Nikki mentioned, have to be the sponsors and the allies and the mentors, if they are not assessed on their ability to be effective sponsors and mentors and retainers of diverse talent, then you're less likely to see that behavior exhibited. So it has to be a metric. You get what you measure. And if you want retention, you really have to measure things like that. So very, very true that you have to change the systems and you have to look at the performance appraisal system. We have a question coming in from Mexico. Is it better to focus on inclusion first, then hiring diverse candidates? Here in Mexico, challenges feel the same as I hear you all talk about it in the US. So first, let's include the people we already have and then go hire more. Yes. I guess that's a question.
Yes. And I want to jump in on this one. It's a little bit of what we call a chicken and egg. I tend to think we need to focus on inclusion first, but we can't just put a freeze on hiring. Right. And so, I think, but I do appreciate this colleague's question because, again, Ken stressed the environment. If we don't have the core good soil ready to receive these new seeds, it's going to fall on, the shallow ground. It's not going to take root. So I think we do need to focus on inclusion. First, we can't put a freeze on hiring per se, but I do think it's important because otherwise that door is going to be a revolving door.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Ken, do you have any reflections?
No, that's well stated. And I think the only other piece I'd add, that seed and soil comment, Nikki, I love that. And I think there's a lot of story behind making sure your soil, the environment's fertilized enough to accept all types of seeds. But the other thing to the question, and great questions, by the way, we have a diverse audience, right? Canada, US, Mexico. But I would also say, do you have people that are focused on this issue? I don't know how large your organization is, but if you have dedicated people, if you're able to do that, to focus on the environment, focus on the talent acquisition piece, but someone who wakes up every single day, back to the accountability comment, that'd be ideal. Give yourself a little leeway. I want to really stress this work is hard, right? The corporations have been companies focused on this for a lot of years, and they're still focusing on it because the work is hard. Not easy to change an environment overnight, for sure. And in many cases, if you're looking for special skills, you've got to do a lot of work to acquire that kind of talent, right? That's diverse and different. So give yourself a little leeway, not too much leeway. Make sure you have the right level of focus, but this is hard. And so I want to make sure that it may be obvious to you guys, but I want to state it, this work's hard.
Mm-hmm. And let me reflect that many of the conversations that we have around the topic of inclusion are just good leadership and good management. I teach the core leadership and management course and in the MBA programs. And one of the things we say is that a leader by definition creates change and excitement and motivates people and to follow in a new direction. And we talk about, what motivates people to follow in a new direction? Well, understanding the new direction. Why does it make sense for this new direction to exist? What is the vision that the organization has around this new direction? And how can we get people to get on the train? Because we talk about the change commitment curve. It's not a change compliance curve. You cannot mandate it. You have to build commitment in the organization. And one of the ways that people get committed is through education and participation. Education and participation. So the same is true of whatever your initiative is. If your initiative is to have more globally competent leaders, then education and then participation. You give them a voice. You give them a voice in the training, in sharing ideas. So you can't go wrong with those two techniques, right? So if you add them to your arsenal as a leader, when people are resisting doing something new, yes, you have to reward the right behaviors. We know that. But education and participation really engage people because they are part of the solution. Another thought that as Ken and Nikki were talking was going through my mind is if you had one trick to make people feel more included, I would say ask questions, demonstrate curiosity. In decision making, we have two methods. We call the advocacy method of decision making and the inquiry method. The advocacy method is with everybody comes together as a team and teams make decisions because presumably they bring diverse opinions and diverse experiences. But if everybody comes together and they're just advocating for their position without exhibiting any curiosity for the position of other people and why other people think differently, then what you get into this competitive mode, my idea wins and yours loses. Instead, go into meetings ready to leverage on the diversity of the group by saying it's, the best idea is usually a combination of several ideas. So why do you think this is right? Why do you think this is going to work better? So inquiry, ask questions. And what you're going to notice is that we don't have common information, that different people have different pieces of information. And the only way it comes out is through inquiry. So if you have one card up your sleeve and is ask questions, be open to the responses, be curious. And if you want the second card, education and participation.
I love that. And I want to add, and what I hear you saying is something that you shared in some of your opening remarks about the model that you all teach at UNC Business School is the collaboration.
Yes.
Right. It is, I don't necessarily have to have all of the answers. My team, our team can come together and come up with, to your point, pieces of everyone's idea is usually probably the best way forward. So that collaborative model, and I don't have to, have all of the answers, I think is incredibly important. I think the other thing about globally inclusive leadership is that many of us are very good technically at what we do, meaning we are technically proficient at audit, at litigating a case, at writing a brief or what have you. But what we don't necessarily always have access to is the training to be a leader. Being technically great at what we do is wholly exclusive in a lot of instances from being a leader. And so we have to figure out, to your point, about ways to build that bridge between being technically, skillfully great versus being a leader and leading teams and people.
Mm-hmm. And you've just put your finger in something I tell my students. So when students start an MBA program, particularly when they're in the earlier part of their career, they come for the technical skills, operations, finance, accounting, right? But when we see people in executive development programs, they all come for leadership and management. So, at the early part of your career, your technical skills are really, really important. That's what gets you hired, right? But as your career develops, it's your people skills that are the differentiator, your ability to lead and manage. So it becomes progressively more important. And that's exactly what you're reflecting on. So that is absolutely true. Yeah.
I love that. No, really good comments. But I think back to, from an organization standpoint, you ask yourself the question around your leaders. How are you developing inclusive leadership skills? I mean, I just think, again, this is critical. And I just think there's not enough time and effort spent on it. I'll give you another trait of an inclusive leader, and that's someone who recognizes their bias and where the bias exists, right? So I think, for example, in UNC, since Mabel, you're on, and Chapel Hill, you could have a leader who was a graduate of UNC, and the only people they want on their project team are the other graduates from UNC. It's a bias, right? Or the 3 out of the 5 members are from UNC, and those are the only folks they go to for the project for input. But what about the other couple of folks who went to different schools? So I think another trait of an inclusive leader is to recognize where your bias exists, really, and to pause before you make decisions and really, really think about that, because that's how the others feel like they belong, feel included, and that's when they're going to be at their best. Because again, I think just to recruit diverse talent into the organization is not enough. It's how do you leverage that diversity to make your organization better? So full stop there. And the other piece I'd say is articulating, Nick, you said the business case earlier. And I would just say, in my observation, sometimes people lead on the business case of it's the quote unquote right thing to do. Focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion is the quote unquote right thing to do. I would tell you that doesn't move everyone in an organization. The fact of the matter is, how is it going to help the bottom line? Right? How is it going to help grow your business, your product? How is it going to help you reach a different target market? So being able to articulate the true business case for your organization, more than it's just the right thing to do, is something I think worthwhile to spend time on. And if we would be able to speak to you live and ask each one of you, why does this matter to your organization? What would you tell us? Like, what is your elevator pitch, so to speak? And by the way, recruits, especially the new generation, Gen Z and folks, they care about these issues significantly and want to work for organizations that are making an issue socially and care about equity across the board. So something to consider if you do a lot of recruiting at the university levels as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely true. We are getting to the point that we will be wrapping up and turning it over to Robin again. And when I come to that certain point in the classes where I'm getting ready to wrap up, I'm always curious as to takeaways or any remaining questions, right? So, the question just came in from Denver, but let me tell you about the takeaways thing while we address the question from Denver. If you have taken away 3 primary lessons from this panel today, 3 messages that resonated with you and that you're going to leave here today and say, wow, I learned these 3 things that are going to make a difference as to how I act as a leader, because in the end, it's going to have to be you who is the role model for this. What would it be? So I'm going to give you that thought and you can answer it through chat. And that would give us an inclination of what's resonated with you. What are you finding most useful? So the question from Denver is, how do we make sure we avoid performative DEI efforts or avoid efforts that are inauthentic? Great question. Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nikki, you want to start?
Okay, so I'll start. I'll say that, to be very honest with our group today, I think our people require, I don't see it as an issue. There's no way that we could get away with it in my organization, performative, because the people that we work alongside of, that we serve every day, they're not having it. And so it's a serious imperative where we get inquiries daily about what it is we're doing and how we're doing it. We have, our goals and our strategy that we have to meet. So I think that there is no room for performative DEI efforts. And I will also say that our community, I think Ken raised this point, particularly post George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and other instances, they are not settling for performative DEI efforts to the extent that there was ever a settling. It certainly, I think, has gone away. And we are held to account for ensuring that we're doing and performing and meeting standards and not just talking about it. Talk is cheap, as the saying goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And it's back to what I stated a little while ago. It's really articulating the why. The why does this thing matter to your organization or your company? That's where you get away from the performative, right? Because so much, I hate to say it, but a lot of companies do this for just to check the box exercise. And people see through that, as Nikki said, pretty quickly, especially your employees. And oh, by the way, from a risk standpoint, like a reputational risk, with technology and social media, they're going to let the world know that all this is the phrase I use often when I talk to, in fact, I go to a lot of schools, Mabel, and visit and inquire about their diversity and their efforts and focus on diversifying the business school or the engineering program. And I'll meet with the dean or the university president and a lot of faculty, and I'll debrief with my team and I'll leave and I'll say, we just got the glossy brochure tour. And like, Ken, what do you mean? I said, well, they knew I was showing up and was going to ask a lot of questions. They pulled out a brochure. They had a couple of diverse faces on it, 2 programs, and they walked me through that. But when I ask questions, because I'm a former auditor, so I ask questions, I could tell that it's just surface. It's a glossy brochure. Your employees will know if it's a glossy brochure. So the question is, again, the why does it matter to your business? Why does it matter to you as a leader? And can you articulate those things in a way that people really get it and it's not performative?
Thank you very much. Takeaways are starting to show up in the chat, and I welcome more, please. That really helps us know what resonated with you. And meanwhile, I realized, Ken, I wanted to comment on your comment about biases, and I didn't. And what Ken said about be aware that you're biased is so important. We have a bias that's actually called fundamental attribution bias. And it goes something like this: I'm right, but you're wrong. And I'm right. I got the market corner on knowledge. My perspective is truth. And because you don't agree with me, you're wrong, and I have to fix you. So we actually teach our students to walk into conversations around performance management by saying, My perspective is my perspective. It is limited and it is biased. Now, if you enter a performance appraisal conversation, a difficult conversation with another person, assuming that your perspective is limited, you're going to ask questions. If you assume that your perspective is biased, you are going to be watching for those biases. Now, Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize in economics for his decision-making work, came to the sad conclusion that it's very hard for people to see their own biases. So the best thing they can do is recruit others to call them out. Hey, look, you're doing it, right? So that is pretty fundamental. So here are some takeaways that are coming in. Lead with empathy. And let me elaborate on that, and you guys jump in if you want to. And empathy is kind of a personality trait. We try to teach it as a skill. So those of us, I include myself, who are not naturally empathetic, perspective taking. Lead with a mind that you are going to stand in other people's shoes and get their perspective. If you're empathetic, you pick up on it easier. If you're less empathetic, you ask questions until you see the other person's perspective. After all, it's hearts and minds, right? So empathy is more the heart side, and minds is more the let me understand your perspective thing. So I was happy about that. Active listening, clearly. If you ask the questions, if there is inquiry, somebody needs to be listening to this, right? Otherwise, you're just going through the motions. And like Ken and Nikki said, they are totally going to call you on that. I like the comment about authenticity. And that's related to that. If you say something when you're not doing it, I mean, people are going to see right through you. And people are less forgiving of an inauthentic leader than they are of a rough leader who at least is being herself. So just keep that in mind, right? That authenticity really matters. And making the business case. Those are so far the takeaways that are coming to the top. We are coming really now. I think we have like a couple of minutes left there. So final wrap-up comments. Those were mine. So I'm done. And I want to turn it over to Nikki and to Ken for their wrap-up comments.
So I wanted to say thank you again for allowing us to have the beginning of this conversation, globally inclusive leadership. I absolutely firmly believe it is the competitive advantage of today and in the future for every business to have leaders who embrace differences, increase belonging and opportunities for everyone at the table. This absolutely includes straight white men. They too are included, and we need to have that conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Mabel. Nikki, just great to serve on the panel with you all today, and just appreciate the invitation to be a part of it. I would just simply say that I believe firmly that conversations are the currency for change. Conversations are the currency for change. These types of conversations are really important, and really important for us to have dialogue and discussion, to take a step back, to really challenge our points of view and perspective, and ask questions like, what else can be true? I meet with a lot of our entry-level people and people who are at the universities, and one of the things I say to them is get below the headline, because a lot of times I've got a high school daughter, and she will go on Google or look at something and read the headline and draw all kind of conclusions from the headlines alone. Get below the headlines, I always tell her, read the story, take a step back and ask yourself what else can be true. I think that's critically important as diversity, equity, inclusion journey. Take a step back, challenge your bias, ask yourself what else can be true. Continue to have these conversations because, as I said, they are the currency for change. And collectively, we all need to have a lot of conversations because we still need a lot of change. So thanks for having me. It's been a blast. I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to send a message, we're all on LinkedIn, by the way. Happy to continue the conversation after this, but thank you so much for engaging, for your time. Mabel, I'll turn it back to you as our wonderful facilitator. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. And I'll turn it right over to Robin, but I forgot to thank you all. So thank you for being here. One of the absolute fabulous things about being on panels is meeting people like you guys. So thank you very much. It is so encouraging. And indeed, thank you to the audience for being here. We clearly deeply care. And remember, these are skills that just make you a better leader, period.
Thank you guys so much. This was a phenomenal conversation. And I think, Ken, you really wrapped up the whole conversation in that comment about conversations are the currency of change. And that's something that we at the Biennial truly believe, and why we create opportunities for these sorts of conversations to convene leaders from across the Americas to create opportunities to identify how we can collaborate and work together to create a more globally inclusive world and a more curious and collaborative workforce. So it is my absolute pleasure to be here with you all, and I thank you very much for joining us. And with that, we will be wrapping up our first session of our Americas Leadership Forum, and we hope audience members who joined in for this event will join us back in 5 minutes. We have our next panel starting on the art of protest with artists from across the Americas, talking about how they use their art to communicate social change. So please stop back in 5 minutes and join us for that live stream as well, and many more events coming up this afternoon. And thank you so much, Mabel, Nikki, and Ken. It's been a pleasure.
Our pleasure. Take care.
Bye, everyone.